Dr. David Clements has advanced degrees from Cambridge and Oxford universities, where he worked as a theoretical physicist. In the year 2000, he began remote viewing, and he made contact with a team of extraterrestrials from Arcturus, from Pleiades, and the Elohim. And these extraterrestrials that he calls his team have been helping him develop some advanced technologies that can promote healing and bioenergetic fields. He has worked also with some top inventors such as John Bedini and Dr. Thomas Bearden, and he's here today on Exopolitics Today to talk to us about some of his more recent inventions and how they can promote healing and restoration of the blueprint of human DNA.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome back, David, to Exopolitics Today.
Hello, Michael. It's a real pleasure. I've been looking forward to this since we did the last interview, and I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of the last one, and I couldn't wait to get back.
Well, a lot of people were very interested in your inventions, and I know in our last interview, you referred to some videos that you had done to kind of illustrate some of the principles that you used for developing some of the technologies and what you were being told by your team of advisors. So you sent me a MP4 of the classical view of an atom. And so, yeah, you want to kind of tell us what is the significance of this MP4, and then we'll show the kind of like linked MP4 of the remote view of the atom that you believe gives a more accurate description of what's happening. So why don't we play those and feel free to just talk over that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Michael. So when I studied physics, I was at university for about 10 years in total. And so I learned everything from atomic physics, general relativity, special relativity, string theory, everything. Now, when I first got taught the model of the atom and how mainstream physics tends to put it together and understand it, I always remember the first professor we had telling us this. They call it the nuclear shell model. So as you can see in the middle of that animation, there's a whole clump of ball like a BlackBerry, which is basically protons and neutrons in the classical view compacted together to make the nucleus. Now, the way that mainstream physics models those is they put them on circular orbits, and they call it the nuclear shell model. And when I remember getting taught this, I thought, that doesn't make any sense. Seriously, is that how it works? And then the professor looked at us in the audience. He said, well, I don't think anybody actually believes this is actually how it works, but this is the best model that we have. So that's what we do. And that thought carried with me, and it never really sat right, and then later on, as I came to my work with the ETs, they began to encourage me to remote perceive the atom energetic itself, because from what I gather from them, there's a big misunderstanding. You see, science has never. There's no way to actually peer and look into an atom. You can sort of infer. And they put together models based on their inferences of smashing atoms to pieces in these big accelerators and certain other things they do. But it's not actually possible to look into an atom and say, aha, there it is. There's our model exactly as we see it. So much of physics on a quantum scale is inference based, so there's very little you can actually do to directly observe this. But there's certain characteristics, physical things that do mesh quite nicely with the way mainstream physics approaches this. But when I looked inside the atom, if you can bring up the next slide, Jazz, yeah. This is the best animation that I could find that gets close enough to what was the interior and the energetic nature of the atom. I remember asking my teams once, and I said, well, I wanted to understand a certain type of physics they were talking about to do with quantum fields. And I said, how would be the best way for me to understand this on a lab bench. And they said, get yourself a plasma ball. One of those glowing orbs where you've got all the streamers coming out and you can put your hands on it and the streamers follow your hands. Well, this is very similar to this image here. And this is exactly, what I wanted to say was that the interior of the atom is made up of very, very intricate field layers and properties, which when I look into it, looks very little like the classical view of an atom. And that's actually important. This isn't just about physics. This is about human consciousness and the nature of awakening matter, as I like to call it. So what we experience today in the world is largely material things, objects, matter, physical things around us being largely switched off and in a fairly, let's say, unaware state, to give it a simple phrase. Now, something is happening during this awakening process where the literal matter of this world is being transformed from the core outwards. And my understanding, and I've seen some examples of this so far, is that as that transformation takes place, and it's all part of this great awakening that people are experiencing, matter is going to start to change its behavior, and it's going to start to change its relationship to the way humanity operates. And the literal matter in your body that makes up, your physical DNA, the matter in your cells, is going to change as well. And from what they've told me is that this is part of the reason why this great awakening has to be taken place in stage, because it's not just a matter of, bringing to people's awareness, information about what's going on, who's doing what, which groups are involved. Or that's a big part of it. But I think there's another aspect of it which goes hand in hand, which is to do with the awakening of the physical matter we have that makes up our bodies, the earth, and the things that we have around us.
Throw in here an idea, and that is, people are familiar with Dr. Bruce Lipton and his idea of epigenetics, where you have the cell, and he says that consciousness can influence, or our beliefs can actually influence the makeup of the cell. So can you take us from the cell to the atom in terms of how consciousness can influence the cell and influence the atom?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good place to jump to. So the way that I've seen it, and my teams have shown me, is that there are many different layers to the makeup of when you go from the atom to molecules, which are compounds of atoms stuck together, all the way through to large, massive compounds such as DNA, which are hugely long, which then, of course, in turn go into cells and macroscopic structures like, human bodies, organs, so forth. Now, each of these has these multi-layered properties that are supposed to interconnect in certain ways. Now, because of the densification, I'll say, this stepping down of humanity that's taken place over thousands and thousands of years that's happened to humanity, a lot of the interconnection between them has been impeded or damaged to a certain degree. So it appears that matter is not conscious in its nature. It appears that matter doesn't do much when you have a thought and say, move here to here. That it's almost inert in a way. And I totally agree with what Bruce Lipton was saying, because one of the things that we're going to become aware of, and there are certain examples where people are having experiences where they're seeing this, is that as matter begins to go through this transformation and awaken, the cellular structure of the human body is going to transform. That's my understanding. It's going to transform the way it gets energy. It's going to transform the way it communicates. It's going to communicate in a quantum level way eventually. I believe that's the unfolding that's happening. And a very fundamental part of that evolution is the evolution of the fundamental matter itself. So there is this huge energetic transformation and reorganization that's going on. And it's happening right from the very fundamentals of the atom all the way to cells, organs, the human body, even our relationship to the planet and the planet's fields itself. It's a huge, colossal transformation. And because of the way that human consciousness works, the more awakened the matter, the more it can relate and interact with you on a conscious level, and the more that you can do on a quantum level with that matter, just with your consciousness alone. So to give you an example, if you take a hammer, it's a dense object. It's made of very densified atoms that make up this big structure we call the hammer. You can use a hammer to do something very peaceful, like make yourself a house and put shelter over you, or you could do something really nasty with the hammer. The hammer doesn't seem to care what you do with it. It just acts according to the certain principles of physics. However, when you come to living energetics and awakened matter, it organizes itself in a way that brings an optimization to the experience of the person who's observing it. It does change in that way. And so even to this day, quantum physicists know that there is this measurable effect that when you look at an experiment, it changes itself. The experiment knows you're looking at it. The matter does know it's being looked at. And there was a German team once that tried to fool the experiment by, okay, we're going to leave a camera here and we'll leave the experiment running. And they were looking at light passing through, it's called a double slit experiment. So you have a metal bar and you have two slit holes in it, and you fire the light through it. It makes a fringe pattern, like a wave pattern on the screen. And what they were trying to understand is how human consciousness could alter this experiment. So they wondered what would happen if you were to leave a camera watching and switch the camera on and off. Would it alter the experiment? And it did. The experiment still knew that it was being watched. So the energies of the photons and the particles they were looking at did still know that they were being observed. And so there is this effect that is measurable now, but I believe what's going to happen is that not only is humanity's consciousness expanding and evolving, so too is the matter of the vessels they occupy as that consciousness. And so there's going to be this extraordinary period. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I do know that it is happening, whereby people...
Something, David?
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to kind of explore this idea further of how consciousness can influence atom at that molecular level.
Yes.
And the atomic level. We know Dr. Masaru Emoto worked with water, and he used consciousness and he used sound frequencies, and what he found was when there were certain positive emotions, that the molecules would arrange themselves in a particular geometrical fashion that was very coherent and like the hexagon. Whereas when there was discordant music or discordant sounds, the matter would kind of be dispersed and be chaotic. Is that kind of along the lines of where the atom is being reorganized in this kind of awakened direction that you're suggesting?
In a certain way, yes. I'm very familiar with Masaru Emoto. He did some fantastic work, and this is a thing to key on what you just said there, and I'll answer your question about the relationship to the atom, is that there is already this interplay, a measurable, noticeable interplay, where water, because of its nature, can respond very, very quickly and very deeply to human emotions, even surrounding sounds, like you were saying, if you play certain music. And these are examples to me of the field properties and the conscious nature of water as it exists, absorbing certain types of information, because like I spoke about coded information in fields last time, they take many forms in many different levels. They can come through sound waves, they can come through electromagnetic waves and so forth. And they all have an effect on the matter and the fields of the matter when they're exposed to them. And water is a fantastic example, because it so readily reshapes itself and reorganizes itself so quickly compared to more, sort of denser, less fluid matter. And so I believe what's going to happen is, certainly this is the feeling I've gotten from my team, is that as the, let me just say this first, because I think that would be helpful to your audience as well. There is this, as part of the game that we're playing, in order to have the construct of a reality where there are certain physics principles in play, so that as we as beings walking around can have the experiences we're having, at a fundamental level, coding in those energetic field is arranged in such a way to provide those laws of physics, such as, like, if you bump into something, it's going to move away from you, or, you know, if you lift something up, it's going to try and be pulled back to the earth. You know, fundamental physics of saying, here's the game we've designed for you. Here are the principles in which the matter you're going to occupy and play in are going to behave. And you can have all sorts of experiences in this paradigm, but these are the basic physics principles that you have. Now, those, I believe, can be changed, and they can be changed when you understand what happens inside atoms and the fields in which they're in, and how these physical traits or attributes, or these fundamental principles of, shall we call, experience operation, or to put it better, you know, how everything on the set, on the stage, behaves in relationship to each other, basically. So, and I think that's one thing that's starting to change. And one of the images I sent you, Jazz, is the one which is the lightning ring. It's called lightning ring physics, to give you an example. Now, conventionally, when you take these ideas of how matter can behave, how it interacts gravitationally, how it behaves when it bumps into something, those kind of things, those in my, oh, it's the other one, that's the one, yeah. Those, according to very, very dense physical principles, and I believe what's happening is, as the atom and matter fields are starting to change and level up because of the awakening process we're going through, the nature of how energy moves and how matter itself moves is starting to change. And this image I wanted to show because it gives you an idea that classically, as you'll know, lightning has usually a very predictable sort of path. It branches out, but it goes from top to bottom. And in electrical circles, the idea is electrical energy moves from the highest potential to a low, or, you know, potential difference between two places. And it always follows the least path of resistance. Now, I'm sure anybody looking at that picture with lightning going around in a circle there will say, well, how is that the least path of resistance? So I think a lot of phenomenon is starting to show itself where the living attributes of these plasmas, these electrical energies, are starting to alter themselves. And we're seeing more phenomena like this, which to me is a really great sign of how the nature of matter, how it behaves in our sphere of experience, and what it can do. That's more importantly, because a lot of the engineering, the physics, the science we have at the moment is based on the idea that physics doesn't change. And here is the matter in the world, here is how it behaves, and how can you cleverly construct it to do X, Y, Z, to build a car, to build a rocket, or anything that you want to do. But the way I'm looking at it now is, well, what if you had access and could change the very physics of the materials you're using? Suddenly entire paradigms are going to open up where you're no longer confined to, oh, if I want to send a rocket into space, I have to do this, this, and this, and this very cleverly. Or if I want to move from here to here, I've got to construct a car, you know, a very complicated object to go from here to here. Suddenly entirely new ideas and paradigms become possible. And I think that's where things are heading. And that's certainly the impression I get from my teams as well. Did that answer your question? That was a bit of a roundabout way to...
Well, yeah, I guess the consciousness element and how that can influence atoms or matter at that kind of smaller level, whether we're talking cells or whether we're talking water molecules.
Yes.
That I think is something that a lot of people are very interested in, because people are interested in healing. People want to know how to do that, and your devices are a kind of step to do that? And it seems like you're saying that the actual matter itself is becoming more conscious, and
Yes.
somehow if we align our consciousness with the consciousness of the matter, then that's going to promote healing.
Let me explain a bit of that, because I think that's a good framework. So the way I see it is that underlying everything is the source field, and the source field almost fractalizes itself step by step by step to make what we eventually find to have the spatial grid system. It's like an experience of what appears to be a spatial expanse, where you can have I can see a distance from here to there. There isn't really a distance, but there's a perception of distance because of the spatial grid system. Now, when you have sufficient connection with your own source field, everything starts to transform around you. And I believe that a lot of texts about masters from the past and beings who had ascended consciousness, could do things with matter. They could create things in the palm of their hands. They could manipulate matter in a way. It's almost like by being close to them, the matter started to awaken automatically, and it would interact with them in a very different way than highly dense, unawakened matter would interact with somebody who didn't have that mastery, if that makes sense. And so there is this correlation between humanity's state of ascension, or moving up into expanded source consciousness or source connectedness, and how matter awakens and behaves around you. And as a collective, as the world is starting to awaken, we're seeing these pockets around the world where there are groups of more sort of awakened or more connected people arising, where the environments are starting to lighten up, and the matter itself is starting to change as well. That's my understanding from the teams. And so it's very much at the heart of this is humanity's ascension process. And when you, like I said, when you have this connection with source within your higher self, the field emanation that you broadcast with that energy has this effect on almost awakening the matter, or starting to raise it up, because it's like you're facilitating, in a way, you're facilitating a greater bridge between the matter itself and the source field by it being close to you when you have that level of consciousness. And my experience when I go up on these ships and I'm near these beings, and I have to only be up there for a certain length of time, because the transition energetically is a very big one, and it takes a big impact sometimes for all of the low energy stuff that gets shifted up because of that. They have such a symbiosis with the ship, the matter around them. There's such an interconnectedness, and the higher those beings are, the more fluid-like that interaction becomes, and the more fluid-like those the matter of the ship almost appears to be, if that makes sense. So does that kind of answer your question in a way?
Yeah, that helps. So maybe something else that might help illustrate more of what you're discussing is you sent me this video of the anatomy of a photon.
Yes.
And then you described how that was being illustrated by an experiment by, I think, a Russian scientist, where he was transforming frog embryos into salamander embryos. So why don't you walk us through that video and what is happening with photons here?
Yeah, sure. So so my team has been telling me for a long time, when I've viewed and perceived the photon in the state they get me in when I do this a remote perception. And the photon, to me, when you look at it from a classical or conventional point of view, a photon is really just a packet of energy within a light field that has the attributes of electric oscillation, magnetic oscillation. It has a spin, and it has an energy, and that's pretty much as deep as mainstream physics goes when it comes to photons. When I've looked at photons, and when my teams have shown me, they are literally, when you look into the deeper properties and the anatomy of it, it's this huge, how could I say, energetic formation, I guess, is a good word to use. That is a living library of everything that it is ever interacted with or touched. And I mentioned, I think, in the last interview about people talking about when a solar flare comes, or, when there's a burst of energy that comes and all these codes get downloaded into humanity and into the earth. Well, those photons that are coming are loaded with codes from the sun. Now, when I look at a photon, this is the best animation I could find that kind of mimics what I see when I look at the photon as in what it is. And like I said, that when my teams first introduced me to this, they gave me the idea that a photon is like this colossal experiential library that can pick up information, it can transfer information. When it interacts with one person, it leaves with information from you, and it goes and bounces off somebody else, and it can transfer and receive information from them as well. And fairly recently, somebody sent me something which I found was fascinating, because it really does correlate with what my teams have been telling me. And is a Russian researcher by the name of Dr. Peter Garyev. I believe I pronounced that correctly. Now, there's a couple of very cool things that he did, which he did experimentally to kind of demonstrate the amazing properties of photons and the spatial grid system, we can talk about later. And so what he did, he got 2 containers hermetically sealed, so there was no way any chemical alteration. So these were completely watertight sealed containers. Nothing could get in and nothing could get out. They were glass containers. And he would shine a laser through one of the containers containing developing salamander embryos, and then would shine that light on another hermetically sealed container containing the developing embryos of frogs. And what he found was that the container with the frog embryos, after having the light shine through the salamander embryos onto the frog embryos, they would change, their DNA would change, and they would start becoming salamander embryos. So in other words, there was this very profound transformation that the light seemed to be carrying, coded information about the DNA structure they were going from, and they would hit the frog embryos. The frog embryos, because of their state, would absorb this and morph and change accordingly. And so for me, in one way, that gives a really good idea about how the healing chambers of these advanced races can work, in that they use these very powerful information and coded energy fields where they can literally remorph and change damaged DNA, do incredible things, many of which I'm unaware of because my experiences are focused on other things. But that certainly, having had some time in those, I believe is what is taking place within those. And so the other cool thing that Peter Garyev did was he was interested on how light winds itself way through a DNA helix. So he would basically fire laser light through DNA strands, and the light would sort of coil through the DNA and it would stay there. Now, the interesting thing he found is when he removed the material, the physical material of the DNA out of where he was looking at it, the photons kept coiling as if they were still going through the DNA, even though the physical DNA was taken away. And he said he observed this effect. The light would do this up to 30 days after he would take the physical DNA away. So in other words, the DNA, in my view, it has this very powerful and profound interaction with the environment and the space around it. And somehow it had created a field imprint in the space that it was in. And these photons would go up and down and continue there until the field would eventually settle down and relax, and then the light would disperse. That's my interpretation of it, given what my teams have told me. But it really goes to show, even now, there are some profound energetic attributes that can be measured and shown in real time that is happening in the photon or light's ability to carry and transfer information, healing information, as well as to do these amazing things through DNA as well. There's such an amount of information to understand, which I believe that the higher ETs are wishing that humanity would start to learn and understand, because healing in itself, when you understand the simplicity of how these photons work and how they can transfer information, could actually be very, very simple for humanity. It doesn't need to be a complicated process at all. And I think that's a profoundly positive message, what's coming in our future. And that really excites me because of all the possibilities and implications, not just for healing, but for other things too. The ability.
Let me just kind of interject here.
Sure.
Because I think this is very helpful for understanding the transformation that is occurring with photons that are being coded. Like this experiment had this laser beam that I guess it was coded by passing through the salamander embryo, and then that was projected onto the frog embryo, and the frog embryo transformed. So it was receiving this coded information.
Yes.
And so this is something that science is starting to understand, that you can code photons in a way that information is transferred to bring about an effect, a restoration, a healing, and so forth.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that it does have to do with the level of development, because the way I see it is infants, young, babies, as they grow, they have this much stronger connection with the source field. But as they develop, it sort of just seems to just dim down as, people progress. And I think there is this interesting correlation between when people get older, there's a certain point where the field sort of lowers down, that connection to the field lowers down, and a person's ability to access those self-healing properties starts to diminish a little. And that's why people have to work on consciously connecting and rebridging, because something does seem to happen to humanity when it gets to a certain age, that initial quite powerful spark of developmental field in fetuses or, embryos, seems to be quite present. But as it starts to form into a child or older, it seems to shrink down, and you need to be able to consciously keep that going, so to speak. So I think there is something to how the photon was able to interact with that field when the embryos are developing, pick that up, and could transfer that to the frog embryos.
Now, I think this appeared in some Star Trek episodes where the doctor would take a holographic imprint of the crew as they arrived, and then somewhere down the track, that crew member, whether it's through aging or injury, suffers something, and they're brought back, and the doctor is able to project that original holographic image onto the body to, whether it's to heal them or whether it's to kind of like reverse age them. So yes. Is this an example of how this kind of a coding of photons can operate using kind of holographic healing technologies to produce all these kinds of effects that you've been describing?
Yeah, there seems to be many different modes of operation of how different races do this. Now, I've only had examples of certain types, but my own ideas and perceptions of how other races and some of the testimony that I've heard from other people putting that together is that there are ways that you can more physically, like you described, rearrange and have molecular placement, or the way that the organism arranges itself, to develop or redevelop anywhere that's been damaged in those techniques. But my perception of my own experiences with those races that use, I guess I would call high dimensional field principles, is that they have that it's almost like they lens through the high dimensional copies of your DNA that are stored in levels that are much, much higher than physicality. So you can't interfere or damage them by physical damage. So if somebody had damaged DNA from radiation or, some kind of illness or something like that, that original undamaged copy of that DNA blueprint is stored at a very high level. And so if these advanced ET races, as I understand it, can access that and use that as a lens to propagate that information of recalibration and healing of those damaged parts of the DNA. And I believe what Peter Gariev discovered was, in his experiments, was exactly that, because when the embryos were developing, it's my view and perception of what my teams have told me that this field is much more present in the physicality, because it's almost like it opens up and it has to be there to develop and help the sort of the field of the object or the being or the human vessel or the frog vessel or whatever you want to call it, how to guide it to develop into what it's doing via the stepping down from the high dimensional DNA all the way down to the physical DNA, and then the arrangement of the cellular structure of the organism itself. So there is this interplay, this multidimensional interplay between all of these physical structures, the DNA, the cells, and the high dimensional fields. But the key thing here is that what seems to have happened to humanity is that they have lost a significant access to this high dimensional interconnectedness they should have. And my view is these high dimensional beings, such as like the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, they have that really switched on. So everything is maintained in a living, organic, sort of instantaneous self-healing mode, if you like, because it just continues to regenerate and flow seamlessly. There's no interruption, there's no impedance or blocking of that living energetic that correlates through those high dimensional fields where those high DNA templates are stored directly into the physical DNA, into the cells, and into the structure or the body as a whole, if that makes sense.
Okay, so that's telling us that with these advanced ET groups, the Arcturians, the Pleiadians that you've been working with, that they are connected to this high dimensional DNA blueprint. So if something happens to them, like they're interacting with the Earth, they have kind of phase shifted to our 3D reality, and just say something happens, they're involved in a crash or they get injured, that the self-healing operates very quickly or rapidly because they are so connected to this high dimensional DNA blueprint of themselves?
I guess I would say that there are certain the way that natural connective field update, if you like, works is it works very normally and passively. I suspect, to answer your question, is if something severe happened, they would probably need to, unless they're very advanced and can directly control that field with their consciousness and literally regrow that body part or that damaged area themselves, they would probably likely to need to use the very advanced cocoon systems they have that can map very quickly, I believe. Certainly that's my experience, that they are very powerful cocoons that they have, or these healing technologies they have. So I guess it would depend on how severe the damage was, but my impression is that with the Pleiadians, for example, they have no blemishes on their skin. Their skin is really smooth. It's very beautiful skin. It's very perfect. And so that normal operation they have, because they have such a heart connection to that living intelligence, the living intelligence knows exactly how to remake you based on the high dimensional blueprint of DNA stored in your fields. And if you open enough to it, it will just keep coming through, replenishing, regenerating, rebuilding. It's an automatic process. But I would say that, to your question, if it's severe damage, I suspect it would be my understanding, because I haven't seen that directly with these groups. But from what I know, I would suggest they would probably need to use, this more advanced form of technique where it can be done more rapidly.
So I wanted to ask you about something that Elena Danan said, and she's a contactee, and she says that she's in touch with Enki or Ea, Prince Ea of the Anunnaki, and he has brought back the original Adamic DNA that he created back when they were doing the original experiments, that he wanted to create this perfect human, or this human that had these kind of like incredible potential to develop, and that his half-brother Enlil kind of like sabotaged that experiment. And when he won a power struggle, he kind of like dumbed down the human DNA so that we could be exploited as workers and slaves and so forth. And that Enki has recently returned with this original Adamic DNA blueprint that he wants to kind of gift humanity to help us return to this original potential that we had. So, so is that possible? What do you know of that?
Yeah, I've not had any direct contact with any of those beings, so there'll be a little bit of speculation here. But I would say that from what my teams have shown me, it seems that a lot of different races are offering a kind of a course correction, if you like, in many different ways. And that, I've listened to a lot of the stuff that Elena has done, and but I haven't had any direct contact with those people, so I couldn't say directly to that. But it sounds to me that there is this oversight going on that I'm very sure of in my experiences with these ET groups, that they are seeding very advanced energetics into the atmosphere and then watching to see how people's DNA responds, how it changes, how their consciousness changes, and how they cope with it. And I believe that there are many different races that are offering the possibility of, to give you an example, what Elena was saying from her contacts, the possibility to have these different DNA activations done. Now, I don't know, because I haven't had any contact with them, whether that's done in the high dimensional blueprint or whether that's done physically, because you can, with a laser like Peter Garia showed, that you can actually morph DNA by using physical lasers. So there are more physical forms of DNA morphing and transmutation that are possible. But from the teams that I've worked with, they seem to be more, and again, there's a little bit of speculation on my part here, is they seem to be more interested in humanity connecting back to the source point within them and allowing the high dimensional DNA within them to sort of project through into the physical DNA, because it has been altered. And the trouble is, because of the alterations that have taken place, that has had a feedback on people's inability or more shallowed ability to connect with the source point, which connects to what you were saying about certain groups wanting to be able to control humanity. So when humanity has a lowered state of source consciousness, your physical body goes into a dense matter state. Now, dense matter can be controlled. You can push it, you can pull it, you can put fields on it, you can mess with it, you can do all sorts of weird, things that normally people wouldn't want to be doing on it. But when it raises to a certain level and you regain that source connection, suddenly the matter can't be controlled anymore. It moves from control into intelligent flow. And those are two completely different paradigms. And so that's my perception of what happened with some of these ET races. They wanted to try and, bring humanity down, so where the makeup of the mind, the makeup of the body would be moving more into the control paradigm, where, the physics of control, push, pull, kinetically moving things around, that kind of stuff, and altering things, on different levels can happen. But when you move out of that into the source flow level of things, that's not possible anymore. You can't do that. And I believe that comes back to our discussion before about how matter starts to change itself when it comes into your vicinity of the field you emanate. When you have that strong source connection, physics changes in the matter, material properties change, and suddenly they start stepping out of control and more into symbiotic flow with you. So it's a very, very different paradigm. So does that kind of cast more light on your question?
Sure, it does. And last time we talked in that interview, you talked a bit about the heart center and the infinity point in the heart center. So really, is that how we make this source connection? And the more we are connected to that, the more these higher potential DNA activations are going to be happening. And the less connected you are to that heart center, then the more easily you're going to be manipulated and controlled by these negative ET groups.
Yeah, so to further help your audience understand this, so in my experience, the more you practice higher self-connection, which is the gateway to the source consciousness itself within you, that source bridge, even just practicing that for 5, maybe 10 minutes a day, I've noticed phenomenal changes in my perceptive abilities, how I can see beings. So, even when beings are slightly phased or, that you wouldn't normally see them, I can perceive them. I think there are a lot of ET beings down here that are using technologies to cloak themselves as they're observing and watching and everything like that. But when you start making that connection with your heart center, your perception ability starts to change, and you can see beyond those kind of those effects. Now, the main thing that I've always been shared with my teams is the most important thing anybody can do is connect with your higher self, connect with the high heart, the sacred heart, and keep grounding that energy and invite that bridge to connect within you and expand, because the energetics that come through that bridge are simply phenomenal. They are profound. They will change the matter in your body. They will start to reshape and reorganize. They will change your perception of reality, and they will change your intuitive abilities. And there's a whole bunch of things that go with that it will change. And by doing that, my feeling is that my teams have been impressing that as people practice this, people will start to step into a human vessel and a conscious vessel that is quantum-based, where quantum phenomena, instead of being just a little bleed through down in the very small scales, like atomic scales or small scales like that, you're going to start to see very cool phenomenon happening in the real world that is not readily perceivable to people in the states that they're in. And so getting access to that profound energy means that you have access to all of the deeper keys to matter, to fields, and reality creation itself, because that's where I believe the masters of the past did it. They had this profound access to their sacred heart and could literally lens and channel this powerful source energy and could lens it with their directed intention to do what they wish, to manifest things in their hand, to move objects, to do all these cool things that even in the dense time they were in, they managed to awaken the matter and have this amazing source quantum type phenomenon happen at whenever they wished it to happen. And I believe that's what's happening with humanity. We are being upgraded externally and encouraged to do that. But my teams have encouraged that the most important thing to do is for humanity to take the leap within and create that bridge themselves, because the more you begin to do that, the more profound and faster that transition is going to happen. So I hope that.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. So just to kind of give people a little bit more to kind of like play with in terms of making that connection with this heart center, the infinity point. I mean, people will automatically assume, well, does that mean I just got to be more loving, project love out there to everyone, the bleeding heart liberal thing? Or is it more along the lines of, the way I think of it is like, well, there's an infinity point and it's like we're a fractal part of the universe, and what you being more in the heart center is you're looking around you and seeing how people and events and processes fit into patterns, and these patterns are something that we are all playing a role in and others are playing a role in, and I guess that creates compassion, it creates understanding. So do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. So in my experience, compassion is actually a level of intelligence within the source field, and that compassionate action is something that becomes innate or automatic when you start connecting with the Sacred Heart intelligence within the Sacred Heart Center. And it's interesting because what I noticed in particularly in the sort of spiritual community, a lot of people try to mentally act out kindness, compassion, and things like that. But it is actually very different when you have that innate level of intelligence, because compassion to me is a type of source intelligence. It's almost like if you want to see it in terms of fractalization, it's one of the attributes of the source field that has created itself so that when it comes through you, it imbues you with compassion. It imbues you with the ability to respect others. You know, these are natural intelligences, which are elements or shall we say, qualities of the source field that are completely natural. And I think that's how Source designed them. Because when you think about it, in order to have differentiated experience or fractalized experience where you've got all these beings running around different things, the one thing that's going to, that sort of keeps or helps keep people in a sort of creative mode where they are creating and co-creating with others and not harming others is the intelligence of compassion, because you automatically understand how to behave and quite naturally towards another being for the greatest good of them and the greatest good of yourself and the greatest good of the whole. You know, and that to me is exactly how the intelligence of compassion happens. Now, to come back to your question about, how to best cultivate this, I would say, in my experience, that what they've shown me is it's not something that you can sort of, mentally play out and sort of try to act out, I'm just going to act good today, or I'm going to do this. It's more like if you relax and surrender to the intelligence in your heart, you will get knowingness, instantaneous knowingness of how it feels good and joyful to be with other people. So it's not a mental action. The mind follows suit. So that in a way kind of differentiates between, acting out, trying to be compassionate and trying to move towards what you think is a character or a caricature of being a good person, compared to just opening that bridge and letting the true knowingness that's in there come through and develop you exactly as a pure, compassionate, living, intelligent being or aspect of the source field, which is completely natural. So it doesn't take any effort. It's quite a natural expansion and process. The more you connect and just sit there and let the energy emanate through you, keep flowing, let it do its thing. You don't even need to do anything with it. It will just invite it into your cells, invite it into every part of you, and it will do its thing, because it is you. And that's the main thing. It is absolutely you. And because of our perception in a human vessel, we think it's some massive thing outside of us, and it's not. It's always been inside. We've just lost that perception of that connection because of humanity's downgrading, because of what's happened in humanity's experience.
Now, you did send me some images, and one image was of a contrast between generative and degenerative coding. And immediately I thought of Masaru Emoto's kind of experiments with water. So you want to maybe elaborate more on that?
Yeah, that is exactly what it is. And, I remember having a conversation with a guy I used to work with when I was up in Scotland as a postdoc researcher. And I was telling him about this. Yeah, I discovered this really cool work. This guy, I think that was when Masaru Emoto had first published a lot of his findings. And I was fascinated by this. And I already had my foot, in this camp because I was working with Tom and John at the same time and doing my inner work as well. And I said to this guy, have you seen this? This is fascinating. He said, what are you talking about? It's just H2O. And I said, well, if that's the case, how does just H2O know how to arrange itself into these amazing, intricate shapes? Take any snowflake. Everyone is different. Why? Because everyone comes from a droplet that has had unique experience. Its informational coding properties are different because it's touched other things that one part hasn't touched, and so it develops differently. And so in the field of water, and the slide that you've put up, I believe that what Masaru Emoto did, and I think there's a few other people who have been doing experiments in this as well since Masaru, really illustrates how matter responds to coded energetics in fields. And water is one of the most profound so far. It really does mimic itself and morphs itself a little bit like a chameleon sometimes because of the energies of the environment and the codings it's experiencing. That could be emotional. It could be music, as you mentioned before. It could be electromagnetic fields. It could be a lot of different things. Now, and so it does morph itself according to the coded properties in its fields. And this is exactly what it is. So because we live in a reality where there are dualistic principles, so you have, positive and negative, you have collapsing vortexing properties and expanding vortexing properties. I think I put a slide up for you there if you don't have to put it up. But now, with the generative kind, what the generative one does, it carries with it the information of expansion and opening up. So it essentially lightens everything. It lightens the material. It fills it with intelligent coding, which starts to cause the material to organize itself in harmonic ways. So what Masaru Emoto found was that, light, yes, that's the one, yeah. So light structures would organize them, water structures would organize themselves with this information and morph into these beautiful shapes when the information was generative, positive, or uplifting, or the intent given to the water was a positive, expansive one. But as soon as you go to the negative side, it completely destroys itself. The structure breaks down. It's just a mess. And as many of your audience, I'm sure, have seen, and I know that you have, because you've spoken of it, have seen just how awful the water structure looks like when you go into that other realm. It's basically because the coding in it doesn't contain a sufficient level of the source intelligence, the generative intelligence. It can't structure itself. It goes chaotic and it breaks down. And it can't form anything meaningful because it's just a gloopy mess. There's nothing. It's a little bit like, the analogy of a child that chooses to get up and tidy the room and organize the room, or just throw everything, in a tantrum all over the place. It's, and one is a more considered consciousness where it's wants to order things in very beautiful ways, and the other one is just a disordered mess where everything is chaotic. And so the diagram here really just shows, just in a visual way, the difference between generative coding, or the sort of living intelligent coding, to degenerative coding, which has a significant lack of that source energetic consciousness in the coding itself. So as you see here, as you begin to expand upwards, everything begins to expand. Matter can change. It starts to become organized. The living field starts to change its properties and organize it. In terms of water, it would be the water molecules, how these beautiful pictures that Masaru Emoto took of those. But then the opposite is when things densify and collapse and become chaotic, and down as you go down the bottom, that's when you go into the levels where there's an ever decreasing level of that living intelligence in the coding. And there's sort of like a balance point in that duality where there's a neutrality, which is that plane in the middle, whether it's neither expanding or contracting. It's just remaining. And I put the image of the photon on the side there to literally describe that when photons have that activation of that source level component inside them, when anybody goes out into the sunshine, you get quite a good dose of that, because the photons that come your way are loaded with those kind of energetics. And, it literally is quite as simple as the beautiful interaction to that which has a sufficient level of source intelligence and that which does not. And everybody has felt the difference in many different examples in their lives. When you get someone near someone who's being really erratic and really negative, you absolutely feel that, and your energy starts to almost drop a little as as you get a wallop of those kind of energetic codes hitting you. But when you're near somebody who has that connection, when I go up onto the ships and I experience those beings who have a very, very profound source connection to their sacred heart, you can feel the bliss, the peace that ensues, because you are almost bathed in this living source intelligence that just tries to uplift you, and it goes in you, and it tries to raise things and clear out the junk and the negative coding that you have inside you.
Like give a contrast here that kind of will, I think, help illustrate what you're saying, because I mean you're talking about living energetics, you're talking about awakened matter, high dimensional principles and activations. So, and you mentioned going into a one of these advanced ET ships where you feel that in the ship itself and all around you. So how does that contrast like going into an airplane? You go to an airport, you get on an airplane and it goes up, and the energetics and the matter. I mean, what's the contrast there?
And that's a great one to go on. Anyone who's been in an airplane will definitely know that one for sure. It's, so it's when technology generates fields. Like I said, energetic coding can pass through currents to fields. And, if you're generating a field from an electrical device, which is operating at a low level, the whole way in which that technology emits fields it just contains all of the coding from everything that it's interconnected with, that it's contacted with. And so modern constructed devices, airplanes, cars, all those kind of stuff, every aspect of the intent of the people who made them to the level of physics they operate at, which is virtually zero. I mean, it can never be zero contact with source because everything comes from the source field. But there's such a low level of contact in those coded energy packets that go with. You're exposed to this plethora of these sort of degenerative energy codes because they don't have sufficient level of source intelligence in them to be generative. And so when you go into a plane, you get bombarded with just a huge wave of, fields, the electrical currents in the materials themselves, the electronics on the seat in front of you, that's stuck on the back of your head when you're traveling. All of those will be emitting fields that, from my perspective, contain those codings, which have such a diminished level of that source intelligence in them. They act degeneratively and chaotically rather than generatively and cohesively and coherent with your biological form. So that is a great example, because there is a whole world of difference between traveling on an aircraft and being on board one of these ships. And to maybe further help your audience, when I go up, it is incredibly peaceful. It's like the entire environment on those ships is almost humming this this energetic sound of harmony. It's the only way I can really describe it. It's so peaceful and blissful. You really just want to stay there. But because of the nature of it, and lower energetics, when exposed to higher energetics, always give way, because what happens is there's this principle which I believe that Source designed into matter so that in the polarity type of thing, the lower consciousness coding always levels up and transforms when exposed to the field of source consciousness in exactly the similar way when masters in texts, there were claims of how everything lifted up when they came into the room or the environment. Everybody started to their whole demeanor changed. And it's because when you get close to that sort of level of energy field and that level of source energetic, everything starts to change inside you. It starts to just wash away and move away the degenerative ones and up levels them to become generative. So it's a very profound and transformational experience. So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's good. That's helpful. It's giving people an idea. So, last time we talked about your Serenity device and how that was transmitting some of these codes, these quantum healing principles, and the kind of living energetics and matter. So how is it that this device is able to transmit these energetic codes, these living energetics, to the kind of environment where
Yeah.
people are at. So how is that happening?
Yeah. Okay. So the way that it works, when I first developed this, I didn't know. They told me what to build, how to build, and I put it together. And they said, we want you to place this next to a cable that was sitting in the living room at the time, and it was plugged into something, and we want you to sit and feel what happens. And this energy just went into the cables. It connected through the cables and just expanded all through the wiring, piggybacking onto through the entire electrical system. And this field emanation started to develop from every electrical circuit, every device that was plugged in and connected, and it came through everything. And then it just started to harmonically transform all of the degenerative coding that was in those fields into purely generative. And so it's almost like a hybrid device where what it is designed to do is to interface with structure at this level, which in this case would be electrical currents going through your wiring system, and to use that to generate and flow through this high-dimensional energetic that comes through and expands it through into your environment via the wiring system. So that's pretty much how it works. And it's very similar to what I described, that the energetic that comes through knows how to generatively transform degenerative coding and harmonize and organize everything into a higher energetic, if you like, a higher state of coherence is a good word to use, if that makes sense.
Well, you generously gave us one of these devices to test at our home, the Serenity device we have in our home. And yes, it has made a difference. And my wife in particular, she can feel the shift in the energetic field. I mean, women tend to be more sensitive to these things. She can walk into a room and she can say, "Oh, the EMF in here is kind of like terrible," and
yes,
and also she felt the immediate effect of the this Serenity device once we installed it as was prescribed next to an electrical device. And yeah, she described this kind of like almost like this very harmonious biosphere just in that room and going throughout the house.
Yeah, and it does. When I further experimented with this, and I'm really glad you guys had a really cool experience with that, because it does, sometimes people can't necessarily feel that field going on. It depends on your energetic sensitivity sometimes as well. But what we saw when we had it on for a while and we began to experiment and get to understand what the teams were asking us to build, were literally there's like an energetic dome that forms around the home, and it can expand as well. So that's spot on. Her perception of that is exactly as they described it to us as well. Definitely.
Yeah, and you also donated one to JP, and he did receive that, and he's also saying that he could feel an energetic field being generated by it, and he says that that's really very, very nice, very harmonious. So yeah, he's got that set up at his home as well.
That's great. And also, what I'd like to add to those people who want to experiment, who have these, you can interact with the consciousness of the emanation that comes from the core of, so the pyramid itself is an amplifying shell. It's not, as some people have mentioned in comments, that it's a pyramid tech, and to a certain level that's true, but it wouldn't do this without the active core in the middle. That's the magic key in the center. Now, the energy that emanates from that core that gets slightly amplified and focused by the pyramidal form is a living intelligence, and you can interact with it. So if you have something specific, that you'd like to request of it, for example, if you want to, one of the examples we had is with the food system. And when we first had it, we were just using it as if it was next to a plate, and it would just do that one plate. And I kept passing it around the table thinking everybody needed to have this next to their plate. And I sort of connected with the device, and it said, I can do all plates at once if you like. And then so we put it in the middle, and suddenly the emanation just literally directed itself from the center of the core out to every plate. And I could see these huge conduits of energy just formed these bubbles. And there's more to talk about the bubble effect later on, but that's that's another subject in of itself. And it completely harmonized the food very, very quickly, so that any degenerative coding in the fooding was transformed. We've even had people who had gluten intolerances that said after putting this next to it, they started eating bread and had no effect. I mean, it's amazing the sort of stuff that people have been reporting. I mean, it's not designed for anything other than just to allow the harmonic intelligent field to come through and do what it does best on food or water or your home environment. So we haven't specifically designed it per se to do this, and this, because the intelligent living field knows how to repurpose things. It knows how to sort things, organize, make things coherent in a way that's optimized for you. That's why they work in very personal ways. A lot of people have described, this is a good example before I get to what I was saying. So a lady contacted us, and she said that she had taken 2 lots of lettuce, or groups of lettuces from a garden that she was growing. She put them both in the same water, moved one away and put one next to the icy vitality, and just left them for a number of days and just photographed what happened day after day. And as you can see on the first day when she first put them in, they're a little bit wilting. And then after day 1, day 2, day 3, the one near the vitality stayed really strong and vital. And it's only after day 7 that she noticed that it was starting to wilt from natural, decay processes. The bacteria that's naturally designed to kick in and start breaking the structure down after a certain time. That will still happen, but the degeneration from degenerative codes, from EMFs and other things like that affect those foods will be taken out, and that can be clearly seen here, because she did say that when the other glass of lettuce, which was taken from the same crop, wilted straight away, and it never recovered after day 1. So clearly, there is this very powerful effect of regeneration from the living field that emanates from these devices.
And I think you also sent me the tangerine test, where you could see it also working with tangerines, that where you had this vitality, IC vitality device next to one of the tangerines and the other one didn't. And yes. Again, you can see the degeneration that was happening. So yeah, quite remarkable.
Yes. Well, the thing is about this, what I find interesting is that it's almost like certain types of bacteria love degenerative coding. It's almost a food source for them, and that's my best interpretation of what happened here when this lady sent us this experiment she did. So the one with you on it was not treated by the vitality, and obviously the one with you was, and they were left side by side, or moderately side by side in the shelf in her cupboard, and just left. And then she left them and came back, and the one without the vitality field started to decay and fall to pieces, but the one to the right didn't. Like I say, eventually that will start to happen, because there are natural processes that do break foods down bacteriologically, and that seems to be an honored process by the living field, because that's just an important part of things returning back to the earth. Once they fall from trees, they have to have this breakdown process take place. But it does, for me, show the impact that degenerative coding by itself has on the structure of the food, much like with water, the way that water behaves with degenerative coding. It does go chaotic when you have too much degenerative coding in there, and it starts to just fall to pieces and turns into a mulch. So I think that's a good example of the two contrasts there, for sure, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And so what are these quantum earth seeds? You want to explain what they are?
Yeah, so another project that the Elohim Arcturians and the Pleiadians wanted to bring through, and there were some other races that had some influence on this as well. They wanted to have these seeds placed in areas all around the Earth. Now, these have activated elements inside them, so when they get planted in the ground, and the ETs are working with these directly. They get activated and they start to emanate this field effect, which, from my information so far, is beginning a very deep transformational process in the matter energy of the body of the Earth. And they do also interconnect as well. So we've been sending these out to people to plant in different areas all around the world, and they're acting like a sort of accelerant, if you like, not just to the assistance of the consciousness of people around the planet, but to the Earth's body as well, to help just really accelerate the shifting, the alteration to so that the material can have more access to the living source field than it does already, because of the densification. The Earth's matter has become very dense, or had become very dense. But because of this evolutionary process, it is starting to awaken, but the Earth seeds are designed to accelerate that process.
Now, one of the things that we didn't get to last time and that I'm really intrigued by is your quantum still point clarifier.
Yes.
So, you want to walk us through, what exactly does this device do?
Yeah, this was a project that the Elohim oversee. And actually, before I continue on that, some people have asked me, because I know that there's been some talk about negative Elohim and positive Elohim and that kind of thing. So to really help people understand, the Elohim that I connect with, they're not in any physical body. They're not a group of beings that come down in physical bodies. This is an expansive field energy, a very high level of the Elohim collective, as I call it, or the Elohim consciousness field, if you want to call it that. And above a certain level, it is not possible for a consciousness to harm another, because to get to that level, you have to have a certain level of source connection in order to get there. See, there's certain keys that the Creator put in place to make sure that if you're going to get to this level, you have to be of a certain connectivity to the source field and a certain open-heartedness. So I've never had any experience of anything on the negative side. Whenever I connect with them via my higher self, these are incredibly loving, very supportive. They really wish to help humanity excel to its greatest potential. So if there are aspects of them that have dropped down into physical form and misbehaving and doing things they shouldn't be doing, it certainly hasn't been my experience that they have anything to do with the level of Elohim that I connect with. So I just wanted to make that clear, because people have asked about that the difference there. So the QSC stands for Quantum Still Point Clarifier, and this is the name that they chose. They wanted me to give it. So they brought this device through and gave me the blueprints to design it. Now, what it does is a number of different things. Firstly, what it does, I don't know, Jazz, if you have the animation there of spatial energy nodes, if you could just put that up to help people visualize a little better. That's the one. So what the teams have described to me is that space itself has an energetic node makeup to it, if you want, like this animation here. So when you see this, it's a whole array of interconnected energetic nodes that almost acts a little bit like an ocean. Many people have talked about fluctuations of the vacuum and all sorts of weird terminology like that. But when I see the spatial systems that are in play, it looks like this. Each of those nodes has the ability to store experiential memory. Now, because of the experiences that humanity has had, negative, because it can store both polarities, both the negative ones and the positive ones, because it's all part of the experience that humanity has to operate in this spatial system and have all the fun that we do and all the experiences that we have. It's all part of the game of polarity. And just to quickly give a very interesting point, a lot of people who say when they go to places where wars have taken place, but now are peaceful and can still feel unrest in those areas, it's my understanding that those spatial energy nodes still store the experiential effects from those tumultuous experiences, those very horrific experiences. And when you go to a certain place where it's very high energy, those nodes store those high energy as well, so you can feel that too. So what the QSCs were designed to do in one function was to generate a field that harmonizes and reintroduces the source energetic back into those spatial nodes, so as to heal the space, the literal space, the spatial node system around the environment, to harmonize any traumatic aspects and to elevate those nodal systems to where they can raise up and become more connected to the source intelligent field themselves. And a lot of people who have them just talk about as well how the environment really raises up, and suddenly they get all these animals coming in towards them and just want to lay down in the ground, which they never do before, and they're quite happy just to sit there. Like one lady in particular said she lives near a forest. Deer never come near them. Often they often skirt around the boundary, but when they had the QSC, they came in and they just lie down in their garden and just sat there. So there is this energetic physical aspect to what the QSCs do, but there's also a conscious aspect, because one of the things they help people do is they have a soft still point generation to them. The top diamond part of that system has within it a soft still point at its center. And what that does is, while you're in that field, very similar to how being near a master elevates your field and starts to awaken things within you, the idea of this device is to create a soft, incremental approach to the center point, or the still point, which is what I describe as the bridge gateway to the through the Sacred Heart to Source, to allow people to just passively and naturally get an accelerated process of awakening that bridge within them. And one of the functions that the teams told me is, if you want to really go for it, you can sit beside one of these devices and ask the Elohim, the high Elohim. So connect through your higher self first and ask your higher self to connect you with the high Elohim teams that work with this, to place a QSC cocoon or an energetic bubble around you. And like with the IC devices, a bubble will be projected and formed around you. And you can ask for specific things in there. You can ask for accelerated growth in your spiritual development and conscious development. Or you can ask for clarification. I find that my perception elevates when I'm inside the cocoon. So if you want to gain understanding or do any personal work that you're interested in doing, it seems to be very much enhanced when you use the cocoon as well. So it's a multifunction device, which some people have asked me, is it similar to the Serenity, and does it do the same thing? So these are designed to do different things, but they are complements to each other. So it really depends on what you're looking for. If you just want protection from degenerative coding, that's what the IC Infinity devices were designed for. But if you're looking for accelerated rebridging and an environment which is undergoes this healing of the energetic nodal, the spatial nodal system, then the still point clarifies is the one that was designed for. So I hope that, sorry, it was another long-winded explanation, but I hope that that helps your question.
Okay, so this quantum still point clarifier, just to try and kind of summarize what you've described so far in this interview, I mean, it does generate this kind of living energetics that has some source intelligence embedded into it because of the design, the shape, the construction. It is intended to be a channel for this kind of source intelligence to come through, and because it's not just a physical device, it is also generating a bioenergetic field because it does have a source intelligence. So you're saying that you actually did say that you could actually communicate with it, and it will respond, which is very different to like normal objects around us grounded in 3D reality that we don't envisage them in any way responding to us. So is this something that maybe can be connected to, say, the Ark of the Covenant?
That's an interesting question. It sort of marries hand in hand what I was explaining before about, I believe, there is a multi-stage process of ascension that is taking place. It's human consciousness. It's the vessel of which human consciousness goes in. It's the vessel of the Earth's consciousness itself. It's a multifaceted raising up. And part of the parcel of that is that the matter itself is waking up, and you will literally start to see, instead of matter being this dense, inanimate sort of lump of stuff that you can push around, brick together like Lego, and make very interesting mechanical objects, it's going to start to be perceived as it has its own consciousness that you can interact with. And the advanced groups that I work with, that's how they interact with their ships, that they have consciousness. The ship is a very advanced, intelligent being, just like they are, and they interact in a symbiosis like they are a collective. You know, there's this very beautiful relationship they have with each other. And I get the feeling that, I mean, I don't know this for certain, but my feeling of having gone on those ships is there's a very specific correlation between the energetics that the crew emit and that the ship emits. And that to be on board one of those ships, you have to undergo some sort of, I'm not sure what the term is, but it's almost like it's like, I think it would be very difficult for somebody to physically go onto one of those ships having not attuned to the living energetics of the ship, you know. And I think I've asked to go on there physically a number of times, and they keep telling me, you're not ready for that yet. You know, there's a lot of development you need to do. But coming up bilocation wise is a very safe, easy way, because the fields of the living intelligence are quite strong, and there will be this natural sort of cleansing and clearing of you. And they said that in principle is fine, but if you're not ready to handle the rate at which that comes up, then, you know, that could be a little bit of a difficulty, and your body is going to be asked to adjust at a rapid accelerated rate, which, you know, would be a little bit too much for my body at the moment. So I believe that's why they do that. So yeah, does that kind of answer your question, Anna?
Yep. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So we do need to kind of bring it to a close, but I did want to ask you about this experience you had, an intergalactic experience that lasted about 40 minutes, and you talked about different zones and intergalactic travel. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, happening. I mean, it's funny the way they reach out to me sometimes. I was sitting just on the couch over there, and I was playing a game on my phone, and one of the teams came through, and they said, we have an experience we'd like to offer you, and there's a limited time window to do this. So would you please put down your device and go into the state we'd like you to, and we'll bring you up. So I said, okay. And I was halfway through my game, so I cannot wait. And there was no answer to that. So I thought, okay, I better do it now then. So I put the phone to the side, and I sat down, and I started to go into the state that they need me to go in. I went up to the ship, and it was a male passenger a member of the ship. And he was quite intense. I have to say, his focus was really focused. I mean, he felt to me, he was a member of the Pleiadian species. But he said that I'd like to start introducing you to some information we'd like you to get. And in their usual way, and they said, following this will be an experience. We want you to have a direct experience of what we're going to show you. It was kind of difficult to perceive what they're getting, I have to say, because the way they do it with me, they can't just tell me, okay, this is the information we want to understand, and there you go, have you got it? You know, it's not like that at all. They will give me quantum snapshots of concepts they need me to understand, and they'll wait until I get it. And I feel that's very much part of their respect of the law of non-interference. You know, they can't just divulge a ton of stuff and say, while nobody's looking, we'll just give you this and you can be on your way. It doesn't work like that with them. They understand and they live that principle of non-interference very closely. And so they can give me an image, and then I'm expected to learn in my own way from seeing that image and break it to pieces. And I'll tell them, oh, is this what you mean? Is this what you're trying to show me? And they'll either be silent if it's no, or they'll get quite excited if I get it, because they need me as a being on this earth plane to be able to get it for myself. It's not something that they can just branch out and just give me a ton of stuff. That's always been my experience with them. And anyway, so they wanted to communicate a mode of how, or give me an example then. I mean, so they did say they don't want me to talk about the particulars about what they were teaching me then. I think that's for a later discussion if you're interested in doing that again. But what they did say is that we would like you to experience our mode of travel. And it was a peculiar, what they described is a field developed around the ship where, from what I understand, is not dislocated is the wrong word. It raised the energy of everything in the ship up to where it was no longer anchored to the spatial energy node grid system I was showing you, or space. Let's just call it space. But it's made up of these, these energy node centers. They'd raise it up so it would come out of that phase, if you like, and then it was free to traverse in ways that weren't limited by the physics of moving through the energy nodal system, if that makes sense. So it's a little bit like, an analogy, somebody trying to wade through water normally and walk through the liquid the spatial liquid they always have to walk through. And then somebody just lifts them up and says, and throws them across really quickly. And they're unimpeded by the physics of the liquid now. And what they said is they have this ability, many of these advanced ships, to pick a location, because the energy node system is frequency specific. So if you can tune to the frequency of a particular patch of that space, you can locate that energetically. And so what happened was they took me to another place and they wanted to show me how this system works to experience it. So the way I understood it was they formed this bubble. The entire craft went up into this higher energetic state, came out of its tethering to the, from what I can describe, of the local space node energy system. And then they picked a place vibrationally where they wanted to go. And virtually instantaneously, it was this, straight to that place. And then what they would do is the bubble would collapse and they would rematerialize in the vicinity of that spatial place they went to, and retether or reappear within that spatial node grid, if that makes sense, or that new space. And so, but the interesting thing they told me is they can't fully materialize there with me bilocated, because something would happen to the location link between me and where I was if they did a full materialization where they took me. So they said, we'll only partially do it, just to give you a feeling of what it is like to do that. And it was a weird experience, because I had a simultaneous feeling of knowing where I was in my body, being up on this ship, and then going through this process of literally just, those movies where the camera focuses on somebody, but they have the camera move towards and they change the focus so everything in the background looks like it's going like away from you. Do you know what I mean? It felt a little bit like that, as if where we were going just suddenly really warped into focus, and where we were coming from just warped out of focus. It was a strange experience. But that's the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. But and I think it was very instructive, because they always like to help me to feel it rather than intellectually know it when what they're talking about. Because going through the experience, you pick up things that you could just not really get intellectually. You simply have to just experience and feel it. But my impression, what they gave me, was there were almost as if they were suggesting that what the what the creator or the very advanced beings who overlook galaxies, universal systems, things like that, had designed zones into the spatial systems to make sure that you had to be at a certain level of conscious development in order to access and do this kind of very advanced jumping. To make sure that if you're going to go flying around and doing all, that you are a sufficient intelligence and source connectedness that you understand how to work with other species, you understand how to respect and live with the law of non-interference and all those things. So I believe that the universe is designed in a very particular way to do that. Now, that doesn't stop certain races from developing a certain level of tech where they can get to other places bit by bit or do certain things. But it does appear from what they glean to me that it does stop them from doing this very, advanced, very, very far distance travel, instantaneous.
So, David, where do people go if they want to get in touch with you or they want to purchase some of your products?
Yeah, so there's 2 sites that we have at the moment with the current tech that we have. So the main one is ICE, horizontal-infinity, which is INFYNERGY.com. And the other site where we've been giving meditations from the high-level Elohim and infinite source intelligence to learn how to bridge that gap within you is infinitesourcecreations.com. So you can we've got a bunch of about 15 meditations on there so far, which you can watch and use for free. So those are the 2 main sites, but of course, if you have any questions or, just reach out to us on either one of those and we should be able to get back to you. But at the moment, we're definitely very swamped after the first interview. We had an enormous interest and we are really playing catch up right now. So it's going to be a couple of days probably before we can get back to you. But
Well, you've done tremendous work in developing these bioenergetic technologies based on what you've been told and learned from your ET contacts and contacts with the Elohim. And I think people appreciate that. And I know that it is helping people. So I do encourage people to explore this further. So I want to thank you, David, for coming back on Exopolitics Today. It was great to have you again.
Yeah, thank you again, Michael. As always, it was really fun and a great pleasure. Thank you.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.